We have with us Feroze Azeez of Anand Rathi Wealth and Ruchit Mehta, Head of Research at SBI Mutual Fund. Gentlemen, great to have both of you with me in the studios. Thank you so much for coming through. Now, as someone who also maps at monthly mutual fund data, I know that every month when we look at the numbers and we look at the net equity inflow number, a large chunk of that is coming via thematic funds, right? And we're seeing funds in all kinds of categories. It could be defense, it could be manufacturing, it could be business cycle, it could be innovation. So we want to start by understanding what is behind this phenomena and how should we look at it as investors. So opening thoughts, Feroze.
Yes, Surabhi, you rightly have observed because you collect the data as microscopically as possible on a monthly basis. So it's obvious that you have got this trend absolutely right. If you have to try to infer why this happens, I would say there are two reasons. One is there is a limitation of how many diversified funds one AMC can launch. Then once you've already put all your bouquet in place and you actually want to bring in two, three more flowers into your bouquet and there's hardly any place, then thematic is a fallback option for an asset management company. But can't be said this as true for all asset management companies. Some asset management companies are using this as a great opportunity to create value. Because the theme identification is best done by the fund manager and research. You have a head of research, right? They are able to identify the themes much better than you and, not you, me and investors. That's a better thing to say. So when you're launching a theme and you're collecting new money at that point in time, that's a message that this is the theme which is good at this point in time. So I would always look at thematic schemes as coming from very credible AMCs as a great identification of a theme which is going to have a run. Now let's assume. If you look at HDFC, it's the second largest AMCs. Of course, SBI is the largest AMC. They launched a defense fund at the right time. And that became the 83% return over the last 1 year. And they also...
83% return, 1-year return on the HDFC defense fund.
Defense fund.
Timing. It's all about timing, right?
Yeah. The timing, not coming into equity, timing of the theme. And why I respect this fund a little more is they stopped accepting money too at a point in time. That's why.
So right now they're not accepting money.
In lump sum, they're not.
And Feroze, here the risk is real, right? Because when sectors are hot or are in demand, PSUs, you mentioned defense, it could be manufacturing, it could be, tomorrow it could be EV. So a lot of times, styles and themes become sort of in vogue and become really hot. And that's when we do see a lot of funds come in. So how do you sort of guard against, while you don't want to miss the bus, but you don't want to be behind the curve, you don't want to get burnt also, but you want the upside. So how do we navigate it?
See, one thing very contrary to what I say when it comes to normal open-ended fund investing, saying never buy an IPO or an NFO in this case, right? For earlier, they used to be called IPOs. New fund offers, you never buy a new fund offer for a diversified large cap scheme or a mid cap scheme or even a small cap scheme. So point one I'm making is when you're trying to take a thematic fund, an IPO is a great message. So, or an NFO is a great time to look at that theme. Okay, don't buy open-ended thematic funds as much. But you can definitely, like, consumption has been a theme. Manufacturing has been a theme. If you see 3 great AMCs launching that theme, that implies that all 3 AMCs concur on that theme being undervalued today, like energy, aapne kaha, right? I don't think energy was so popular. But still, SBI kind of an AMC is having the courage to launch and uses infrastructure to collect money at the right time.
Because energy is, frankly, right now in the market is not sort of a theme or a sector that's in vogue. It's not hot right now. So therefore, this one is an interesting launch. But again, I go back to the question, what about the themes which are running hard, PSU, manufacturing, and then how do you decide whether a thematic fund is right for you in these themes or not?
Basically, that's the warning signal which I'm giving to all the viewers, that if you're hearing a larger decibel on a certain theme, that's exactly the time to sell that theme more so than buy it, right? So, like energy was not as popular. Defense back then was not so popular. So that's one thing which I'm saying, an NFO from a large AMC is a good message that this is a theme. You might not have heard it as many times, but it's a great theme to actually go with NFOs in thematic category and not buy too many themes which are already existing.
Sure. Okay, so one sort of the first step is to identify the right theme. Feroze, is important, right? Because like Ruchit also mentioned, sectoral funds and thematic funds. And sometimes these terms are used interchangeably. But highlight for us the small nuances, the differences between the overall category of sector funds and thematic funds, which may involve more than one sector.
Yes, actually, it's such a customized space. Even in themes, there are such diversified themes or concentrated themes. Like SBI infrastructure is a part of my model portfolio.
Okay.
Let me illustrate it with this. SBI infrastructure has so many sectors that I'm not too worried that it is still called a thematic scheme, because it has everything other than pharma and IT. But it's still called infrastructure, right? Because financial services is infrastructure, financial infrastructure of the country. So you will have to look at, but manufacturing is a little more narrower, right? Business cycle is a little more wider. So whenever it comes to thematic, cannot be top down, it has to be bottom up. Which scheme are we speaking about?
Sure.
Now coming to your pointed question, sector is very, very narrow. Right? So if you're buying a banking and financial services sector, 90% of the money, 80% of the money is going to be in that specific sector. Now, there are 12 funds in the thematic category who have greater than 50% of their money in one sector. Now, these 12 may be as close to a sector fund than a thematic fund.
Okay.
There are 26 funds who have in their largest sector anywhere between 30 to 50%.
Okay.
So these 38 funds, I would call them as narrower themes, higher on risk.
So you would prefer to be in a more diversified thematic fund than in a very narrow fund, which is then it becomes like a sector fund.
Absolutely.
That's the approach.
Yes.
Feroze, you want to add to that? Things to keep in mind?
Things to keep in mind is one, definitely that how old is that theme? Like infrastructure. People, like he said that, Ruchi Saab said that you can't have more than 10%. Into one specific theme, because you have to consider risks. This is the biggest anomaly or biggest problem which happened in 2008. Diversified fund had gone 50-60% in infrastructure. Clients got so attracted and bought 30% more of infrastructure. I have seen a portfolio which had 92% infrastructure. And then 2008 happened, and you saw drops of 70% in that portfolio. Right? And Nifty fell 40-50%, but this infrastructure fell 70-80%. So point is, don't go very heavy. Don't go to a very old, popular theme. Now, for example, momentum for the last 2 years was a great theme. There are only 2 funds.
Okay.
That means it's not a rundown kind of a theme. It's not old wine in a new bottle, right? Energy. You don't have so many funds, right? So that's a newer theme. So always go for a newer theme. Consumption was manufacturing. Now, for example, transportation. There are 5 schemes of transportation, right? And it's the oldest one would be maybe 1.5 years back. So that means this is not still played out. So first thing which investors should look at is it a theme which is old wine in a new bottle, or there's something new which has been identified? Second, don't go passive, is my opinion, because the theme as a concept is top down. Again, if you go top down by the full index, top down plus top down is not a very dangerous strategy.
High risk.
Very high risk. If I'm buying a theme, then I will want Ruchi to actually filter down some very bad apples.
Do some stock picking and get the best sort of companies in that fund, right?
And eliminate, even if you don't get the best, you have to eliminate those 5 bad ones, which don't have the right governance, which an index will not be able to. Index is a growth index. The better it does, the more weightage it gets. More weightage it gets, better it does. It's a chicken and egg story. So never go passive in a theme. I would rather trust a research house to eliminate those 5-7. They might reduce my return, but I'm okay to live without 2-3% extra, but I would not fund a business which is not compliant. Let me give you an example to amplify his point. Bank Nifty, very popular. 2 stocks are 57%. When you ask a person, I met a trader who says, I trade in Bank Nifty. I said, just take a guess, what are the top 2 stocks weightages? He didn't know. And he guessed 25%. So point is, you might think, and this is a very widely traded index. You ask anybody who's trading it, would not know that 60% is in 2 stocks. So what you think optically is a lower risk, when you go passive, you're buying very few businesses.
True. And that's a risk that you have to bear in mind if you're going to be in a thematic fund and then be in a passive fund, which is going to mirror the entire index corresponding to that particular theme or sector. So that's a point well taken. Sometimes what happens is that if you do have a diversified thematic fund, like you mentioned, infrastructure, I think investors can also ask the counter question that if it's going to have a lot of banks and a lot of large cap stocks which are already there in my large cap fund, then do I need the thematic or not? So just your final thoughts on the subject and the kind of thematic funds that you would consider.
Yes, I think, see, very microscopically from their basket, I've chosen SBI Infra because the fund manager has been an infrastructure analyst way back in 2007 as well. Okay. So he has seen the fund manager being an analyst of that sector for 15 years brings in a lot of merit.
And he's seen the boom and the crash and the burn, all of it.
And infrastructure went through a very long lull. And your fund manager being an analyst, it's like a general being the soldier.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one reason why I've chosen that. Second, I think it's very important to make sure that when you're looking at sectors, themes especially, when you're looking at themes, you make sure that you stick to larger AMCs. And if you ask me which is the thing which I am excited about, of course, this is the theme which is not translated into several funds. I'm looking at tourism. Tourism, there is an index, Nifty Tourism Index, which takes 30 large companies from NSE 500 which represent that industry, but there are not too many funds which are replicating that. There's one more thing which I am...
There's a passive fund that's come in on the tourism index as well, right? But you're saying don't do passives when you're doing themes.
So I'm waiting for that theme to develop itself.
Okay.
There's also one, Nifty IPO Index, which replicates the IPO performance of the last 100 IPOs.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm really hopeful because what happens is an asset management company gets anchor positions in an IPO.
Right.
Right. Of course, anchor is also oversubscribed, but there's an anchor book which closes before a retail book. Right. So if I, as a retail guy, don't want to open 19 demat accounts, 20 demat accounts and apply for a specific IPO to get those two lotteries, I go through a fund route and capitalize. These are the two emerging themes which are definitely not translated into enough opportunity today. I would be very excited if large AMCs like SBI took it up and brought me something which is executable.
Okay, so tourism and IPOs. If there can be some interesting thematic funds around this as well, something to watch. Gentlemen, it's been a very helpful discussion. Thank you so much for joining in and shedding some light on this sort of new area of investing, which is thematic. So really appreciate you being with us in the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.